Hello friends, welcome to my channel That One Story. Let's begin. Enjoy watching. Stopping abruptly, Marina looked at her friend. No, I've changed my mind. Go alone. I don't see any point in wasting time with idle talk. At that moment, two young guys came out of the bar next to where they were standing. Marina's friend smiled at them and murmured, "Wow, what handsome guys. So my sister told me to come here for a reason." Marina furrowed her eyebrows and scowled even more. "Listen, let's go without me. I have nothing to do here." She turned around and wandered back to the bus stop. And it looked like some sort of tumbler went off inside Marina. So she refused to spend any more time in that noisy place. And this despite the fact that in the afternoon she had been trying to party her ass off. Lately Marina had been having a hard time with men. She would get an Alphonse, or a drinker, or some other problematic subject. In general, it was just bad luck. At the bar where her friend had taken her, she hoped to unwind a little and, if she was lucky, meet an interesting man. But when she saw the drunken, and most importantly, unpleasant guys coming out of there, she fundamentally changed her intentions. "I'd rather watch a movie at home, and that would be more useful," thought Marina, and got on the bus. Sitting next to the driver, she listened with a smile as he hummed to the tune that was playing on the local radio. It was very interesting to watch him shake his head and move his lips, trying to hit the notes and the words. When Marina opened the door of her apartment, she felt empty again. It had been a year since she had broken up with Victor, but there was a good reason for that. He became addicted to gambling and losing not only his but also her money. We had to tell him goodbye. The more that no persuasion has not helped. Since then Marina never got acquainted with anyone else, except that her friend was always trying to stick the next suitor. Remembering this, the girl smiled to herself and said to herself, "Oh, that Diana is a fox." Nothing stops her. At the same second the phone rang, and after putting it on speaker, Marina heard her mother's voice. "Hi, daughter, am I interrupting you? Or should I call back later, when you come back from the disco?" Calling the bar a disco, Valentina Yegorovna still lived by the old notions. Laughing, her daughter answered, "No, I've already danced enough for a lifetime, and to be honest, I went back." "Well, your daughter couldn't get over her own principles." Valentina Yegorovna sighed deeply. "And that's right. What is there to do? You better tell me, what about your vacation? My father and I got you a ticket, and you still have not decided anything." And indeed, Marina's parents made an effort and gave her a surprise trip to Altai, a wonderful opportunity to rest and gain strength for further work. By the way, the surgeon's profession forced Marina to be always in constant stress, and this vacation she just needed. "After listening to my mother," she answered discreetly, "tomorrow everything will be ready. I spoke with the head doctor, and he agreed to let me go for 2 weeks. But I'm not sure. Do I need this trip to Siberia? Maybe I'll just stay at the cottage." Mom sighed heavily again, and, barely restraining her emotions, she muttered, "It's still useful. At least, better than your going to discos." "Well, I hope your boss doesn't let you down." That was the end of their conversation, and Marina turned off the phone. She didn't have the heart to tell her mother that she wasn't ready to travel like that, and there was nothing wrong with that. But the long absence from home was somehow stressful. Marina even secretly hoped that their head doctor, Semyon Arkadyevich, had not signed the leave application. "So, Marina Sergeyevna, I'm letting you go for exactly 2 weeks, and I assure you that you will have a wonderful vacation. I've been to those places myself, and I can honestly say that Altai is a marvelous place." I was not going to argue against these arguments, and Marina began to get ready for the trip. The first thing she did, of course, was to visit her parents, to get them to give her the ticket and to listen to all the warnings, especially zealously, in this regard, tried his mother. "Look, my daughter, be careful and do not communicate with all sorts of rascals." To this my daughter parried, "I am not a little girl. I am already 32 years old. I can also stand up for myself." Upon hearing this answer, the father stepped in. "That's our way. She's like me. She will never let herself be hurt." As she hugged her father, the daughter conspiratorially added, and no one will get in my way. Time will tell what these words meant. She spent that evening with her parents and stayed with them overnight. The next day, Sergei Mikhailovich, together with his wife, accompanied their daughter to the train station. Her mother and father waved at her when Marina had already entered the carriage and leaned against the window. At that moment, for some reason she felt so sad and wistful. On the way she managed to meet a nice woman who was her compartment mate. It turned out that she, too, was on her way to Altai for a vacation. 2 days later the train arrived at the place where Marina, her companion, and several other people were met by the curator. She seated them in a small minibus. We'll take it to the resort, and there I will tell you what to do next. Marina immediately did not like the wreck in which they were going to drive, but she did not dare to tell the curator about it. She did not want to spoil her mood before time. However, on the way, she began to feel queasy, as if her body rejected the trip and could not tolerate the jolt. The driver had to stop several times to allow her to catch her breath and come to her senses. Having lost time, the curator turned to the driver and loudly commanded, "Kostya, step on the gas. We are moving like turtles." He nodded in response and pushed the pedal, and it was a fatal mistake for him and for all the passengers. The bus skidded on a sharp turn and skidded off a cliff. Marina only had time to grab the handles of the seat to avoid being thrown out the window, and then everything was a fog. The bus landed by the river, tipping over on its right side. As for the passengers, they sustained minor injuries and managed to get out on their own. The curator was also lucky. She only hurt her knee and elbow, but otherwise nothing bad, except that Marina was nowhere to be found, as if she hadn't even been on the bus. Having realized that one of the passengers had been lost, the curator began to shout loudly, "Marina Sergeyevna, where are you?" Just then the driver came up to her. He was limping badly and holding his chest. "Call the rescuers, Tanya, and an ambulance. Thank God you're alive, but there are serious injuries." Nodding in response, she began calling all the services that could get them out of here and provide medical attention. It was getting dark when Marina regained consciousness. She no longer remembered how, in a state of shock, she got out of the bus through the broken glass, and then ran through the deep forest. No one knows how much time passed, but after losing a lot of strength, the girl soon collapsed unconscious on the grass. Suddenly, Marina saw an old man in front of her. He was dressed in some strange clothes. The fabric looked something like burlap. In addition, he had a thick beard hanging down below his chin. She flinched when he held up his hands and said, "Here, let me help you." "Onion." She furrowed her brow and felt an unbearable pain in her head and thought to herself, she must have gotten a concussion from the blow. Another man, only considerably younger, approached the old man. The two of them dragged something like a small wagon to her, but without a horse. After laying Marina on a bed of straw, the old man and the man dragged the cart into the woods. Not understanding what was happening and where they were taking her, she fell back into oblivion and passed out. She woke up in a village, if you could call it that. In a circle were 6 houses, and in the middle of a massive well with a crane, the grandfather and his helper appeared before my eyes again. "Well, why are you lying down? Get up. I will not carry you on myself." That's the kind of hospitality that made Marina feel sick again. "Don't. I'll go up myself." Gathering what little strength she had left, she got down from the wagon and looked around. There was a girl standing by one of the houses, and beside her was a little boy. He was holding his hand to his right side and writhing. Marina, as a surgeon, immediately realized that the boy had a problem with his stomach, but what it was, she could not yet understand, for her brain was still twisting from the rush from the bus. She was distracted from her thoughts by the old man's voice. "There, our barn is free. You can stay there for now. I'm sorry, but I can't let you in the house. We don't let strangers in." Marina strained her memory, trying to get some information from the depths of her subconscious, and then it dawned on her that these were most likely old believers. Interesting company, she meant. Outsiders are not allowed, live apart, and even in the woods. Accompanying Marina to the barn, the old man soon brought some food, this vegetable stew, and here herbal tea. "We don't have any pickles, so make do with what you've got. When you are a little stronger, my son will take you to the train station." And as soon as the old man left, the same girl with the boy came to her, holding out her hand to Marina. She said, "My name is Eudokia, and your name has already been told to me. You were repeating it all the way here on the cart." Nodding her head, Marina replied, "Let's get acquainted, especially since I don't know when I'll be out of here yet. By the way, what about the boy? Is he sick?" The girl looked around as if afraid of spies, and whispered quietly, "It's my son Vasia. He has been complaining of pain in his right side for 2 days." When Marina put her palm to the boy's forehead, she felt a fever, so he might have appendicitis. "Of course, I can't say for sure, but certain symptoms point to it. I almost forgot. I am a surgeon by profession, and you cannot be afraid of what you hear now. Your son needs to go to the hospital right away." In reply, the girl cried and whispered, "No, you can't. Ignat Vasilievich won't allow it. He only trusts our grandmother the healer." I don't want to contradict him, especially as she cures everybody here and says that everything is God's will. The girl was silent and blinked her eyes, and Marina guessed that there were gaps in the healer's treatment. "I take it she does not always help." Yevdokия nodded and said, "Yes, there are often lapses. Recently, Ignat Vasilievich's eldest son also suffered from pains. Granny Agafia treated him with herbs and prayers, but he still died, and in agony, and our leader was very angry at the healer. However, after some time he calmed down and allowed her to treat us again." Marina was shocked by their customs. In the age of progressive technology, people continued to be treated with herbs and hexes. After looking at the boy again, she added, "If it's appendicitis, it can burst at any time, and then no witch doctor will be able to help." At that moment Yevdokия was called out by the man who had helped to carry her and her grandfather. "Come inside, there's nothing to fuss about." Turning to her, the girl fearfully muttered, "Oh, I'll run, or Ivan will be angry. He is my husband, and I cannot disobey him." The boy, still holding his right side, followed his mother, putting her hand to her cheek. Marina only shook her head sympathetically. This village did not even have electricity, but to keep her from sitting in the dark, they brought her a kerosene lamp. The old man, when he put the lamp on the table, smilingly said, "We also light our houses, but nothing. Get used to it. It's better than your damn technology. They are nothing but misery and harm." And this was said by a man who had lived for many years and who also had a son and a grandson. Marina could not believe her eyes. It was the first time she had seen such a thing, as if she had been in a past century. But the next day the girl woke up to the sound of children screaming from the street. It seemed that Vasia was getting worse, and he could no longer stand the pain. Marina looked out the window and saw him being carried to the bathhouse, and a minute later an old woman followed there. "So it is that it is a witch doctor, and now she will treat the boy." After running through in her head all possible options, Marina jumped out of the barn and rushed to the bath. However, Ignat Vasilievich himself stood in her way. "If you feel better, Ivan will send you away from us right now." Not paying attention to him, Marina continued to run to the bath. The old man caught up with her in 2 jumps and hissed angrily, "Don't you dare interfere with the child. If it will please God, then he will recover, and if not, God's will." Marina turned to the old man and shouted, "He's going to die. Do you hear? He's going to die." A life-saving thought occurred to Marina. "Since I came here, it was God's will, and you are interfering with God's work." The old man stared at the girl in a daze. It was obvious that he was beginning to get the meaning of her words. With a jerk, he opened the dilapidated door and literally pushed her inside. She fell to the floor, hitting her knees painfully. Ivan came in next and helped her up. "Examine the boy." Father said it was okay. It was almost dark in the dirty, damp bathhouse. A single candle barely illuminated Vasia, writhing in pain, and the old woman sitting nearby. She was muttering prayers and did not even look up at those who entered. Marina immediately knew it was bad. Lost time. It is necessary to go to the hospital. But how? When Marina came out of the bathhouse into the street, she turned to Ignat. "I knew it was a medical emergency. The child is dying. Do you have a horse?" The old man blinked his eyes. "No, my dear, no hospital. If it pleases God to take him, then so be it." Marina understood there was no one to help the boy, so she rushed out of the village. She did not know where to run to. but she rushed as fast as she could in the hope of saving Vasia. Wandering among the bushes and massive pines, Marina suddenly came upon the hunter. He was stunned to see the only woman in the deep woods, and in such a shocked state. "Where are you from? And what happened to you?" Marina waved her hands and then began to say, "Please help me find a connection to the city. I am lost and I need help. There is a small settlement nearby. Old believers live there, and they have a boy who urgently needs hospitalization." Hunter took out of his pocket some paper, and looking closely at Marina, said, "Right, it's you, Marina, the same woman surgeon who disappeared after the accident." It turned out that they had already given an APB on her, including the hunters. "I'm Nikolai. If it's okay, you can just call me Clea. So, I know the way to civilization very well, and in order not to lose time, let's visit the old believers at once. I know the way to them." While they were walking, just in case, Marina shared with him her fears that these old believers, because of their customs, will not give the boy away. Nikolai looked at his watch and said, "They will all gather in one house now and pray. We have a chance to take the boy. When they're praying, even if the roof over their heads collapses, they won't hear." Meanwhile, Marina and Nikolai ran into the bathhouse and, pushing the homebrew healer aside, carried the boy in their arms. In the blink of an eye they covered the distance to the forest, noticing at the last minute how Evdokia had joined them. Meanwhile, the old believers were already rushing after them, waving their pitchforks and axes. Nicholas on the run commanded Marina, "There's my car, open the door, and I'll put the boy down." A minute later the hunter's car roared and jerked from its place. The old-timers could not catch up with them, and Evdokia and her son watched through the rear window as they waved their hands and shouted something after them. Nikolai squeezed everything he could out of the car. Soon they arrived at the district hospital, where the boy was immediately handed over to the doctors. Vasia was operated on in time. A little more and his appendix could have burst, and that it is unlikely that terrible consequences could have been avoided. What is interesting, Vasia's legal father, that same Ivan, never showed up. Yevdokia kept worrying that she would not be accepted back. "You understand that I was fully supported by them. My parents were dead, and there were no other relatives. So Ignat Vasilievich took me into his community. I am very grateful to them for what they did for me." Marina was shocked by these confessions, but there was nothing she could do. However, a day later, Ivan still came to the hospital, and the first thing he did was apologize to Marina. "I'm sorry I didn't believe in you, and thank you for saving my son." A little later, the head old believer showed up. "I shake your hand, Marina. You saved our grandson. I realize that your appearance was by God's will, and our whole congregation will pray for you." And so they parted. Evdokia would be in the hospital with Vasia for at least a week, and it was time for her to go home. After all, the trip to the sanitarium was over, even if not the way she wanted it to be. While seeing her off to the train, the same hunter, Nikolai, promised that if he were in their area, he would definitely visit. Marina nodded in response, but she did not really believe that he would drop everything he was doing and rush to a strange city. But not 2 weeks after her return, one day she saw Nicholas with flowers outside her house, accepting a gorgeous bouquet from him. Marina said, well, you still came." To be honest, she had a liking for the guy back when they were together rescuing the boy, and now it intensified. And without thinking, Marina offered to stay with him. Nikolai agreed, and even found common ground with her mother. Interestingly, Valentina Yegorovna approved of her daughter's choice. However, after a month, Nikolai persuaded Marina to stay in his spacious and bright house, located in such a beautiful place that it was breathtaking. The girl fell in love with the majestic Altai territory immediately, and the decision to stay here forever came on her own. As for Evdokia and her son, they are doing well now. Ignat Vasilievich had mercy and released his daughter-in-law to Marina. They are now friends and often meet to just have a heart-to-heart talk. Ignat Vasilievich allows the girl to come to their village just to visit, and at the same time to cure the inhabitants, saying God's will for everything. "He sent you to us." Marina still can't believe that this trip, though not entirely successful, changed a lot in her life and allowed her to look at the world differently. Vyacheslav Igorovich came out of the operating room, took off his drenched robe and cap, and sat down tiredly on the couch. There was no strength at all, his eyes were slipping, his back was humming from standing for so long. Still, he was pleased with himself. The most complicated operation had gone brilliantly. The doctor was already scrolling in his head about the consultation he had planned for tomorrow, when suddenly the phone rang. It was the spouse. "Honey, how are you? Are you okay? I'm worried. Are you late tonight?" Lenica was worried. "Don't worry, sunshine, I am done. I'll be there soon." The doctor smiled and ran to change his clothes. When he went outside, Vyacheslav breathed in the cool April air and thought, "How lucky I am to have Lena, my daughter, and my job." Vyacheslav Igorovich was the leading surgeon in the city's well-known and prestigious private clinic. He had an excellent reputation. Patients signed up for consultations a month in advance. At the same time, the doctor was very tactful and modest. His fame and success did not spoil him. This was the way his father and mother, intelligent people and hereditary doctors, had taught him since childhood. When he took Slavik to kindergarten or school, his father always politely greeted Aunt Masha, the janitor, and they went together to feed the homeless dog Zuzu in their yard. Each time my father would say, "Remember, my son, everyone should be treated with tenderness and love, with kindness and affection, whether it's an animal or a person. It doesn't matter if the person is rich or poor. If you can help him without hesitation." Since childhood, Vyacheslav was brought up in love and prosperity. The family has always had a quiet, peaceful environment. His mother respected and honored his father. There has never been any scandals or shouting. Since Slava grew up in a family of doctors, he was attracted to medicine from an early age. So after school he did not hesitate to go to medical university, graduating brilliantly. Lenica was a perky girl with a long plait, perky, brave, and determined. They met on the dance floor. Slava was very shy, and he thought he was an ugly, tall, bespectacled man. He literally burned through Lena's eyes, watching her dancing and laughing with her friends, but he did not dare approach her. And before that, he sat beside her in the library, but he was afraid to make the first move. When the white dance was announced, Lenica came up to him herself and said firmly, "I'm not going to dance, because you can't take your eyes off me, I can tell." And she took the boy with her with a wink. They never parted again. After graduation, Lenica worked as a pediatrician in a clinic. Soon after the wedding, the girl became pregnant and they had a beautiful daughter, Samsha. Both parents could not have wished for their little daughter. The little girl grew up clever. From her small age she loved to sing, so by her 10th birthday she played the piano quite well, pleasing her parents in the evenings. And so our heroes lived well and in friendship. The doctor worked hard, and in spite of his status and rank, he saved patients' lives without hesitation. But one day an event happened that forever divided his life into before and after. It was a regular shift. A heavy patient was brought in by ambulance. On the outside he was an elderly man in his 60s. He was poorly dressed, a cold shabby jacket, clearly out of season, very unkempt and haggard, and had tattoos on his hands, so I could tell he had been in gaol. The man was thrashing around in delirium and writhing in pain. After examining the patient, Vyacheslav Igorovich ordered to prepare him for an urgent operation, because the exacerbation of ulcers is not a joke. He himself went to report the situation to the head. He was, to put it mildly, not thrilled. "Slava, look, you're just like always. Good doctor a little. And what do you want me to do? After all, it is clear that no one will pay for the operation, and materials, too. Well, we're a private clinic, not a charity foundation. After all, what do you suggest I do? Throw him out on the street? I'm not the one who brought the patient in, but the ambulance to the nearest hospital to help him. I'm a doctor. I'm supposed to save people, not leave them for dead. I'm sorry, but I can't do this." And Vyacheslav Igorovich ran out of the office, rattling the door. Lutakka, the nurse, ran up to the doctor and held out something. "Doctor, look what fell out of the patient's breast pocket when we undressed him. Doesn't this guy even look like you?" Vyacheslav picked up an old, worn-out photograph and stood there. There was a picture of himself, only in his youth. The same face. "That can't be. This is insane. Where did that man get my picture?" The man wondered, having managed to control himself and get the shivers out of his hands. The surgeon went into the operating room. After a long 4 hours, everything ended safely. From that very moment, Vyacheslav was literally counting the days until the patient would be strong enough to talk to him. The doctor was exhausted, asking himself 1,000 questions and not finding an answer. He kept pulling that picture out of his briefcase, as if he wanted to make sure he was wrong again. But no, it was his face. At home, the surgeon took out an old album and began to leaf through it frantically. His wife asked worriedly, "Slava, what's wrong with you? Is something wrong? I can see you haven't been yourself all day. What are you looking for?" But Vyacheslav didn't want to worry his wife unnecessarily, so he answered, "Don't worry, honey. It's okay. I just wanted to look at some old photos. Look how young and beautiful we are here." The man quickly changed the subject. The picture was of him and Lena when he was a student. Vyacheslav took the picture out of the album and discreetly slipped it into his briefcase. At work, in the resident's office, he put 2 pictures next to each other, and he gasped. Both of them had his face on them. "What the hell?" he raged. The doctor was sure he had never known the man in his life, nor could he have met him, and the last name Zliznov didn't ring a bell. His last name was Malishev. No resemblance at all. Finally, the patient was transferred to the general ward from the ICU. The doctor decided to visit Zliznov and find out everything. Vyacheslav Igorovich quietly entered the room. The patient was sitting on the bed, looking sadly out the window. "Good afternoon. How are you feeling?" "My name is Vyacheslav Igorovich. I'm your attending physician. And you?" "That's better. Thank you. I am very grateful to you. I understand that the clinic is private, and you shouldn't have operated on me. My name is Alexander Sergeyevich Zliznov. Listen, I have a very serious conversation to have with you. When you were taken for surgery, this photo fell out of your jacket pocket, and the doctor put that old photo in front of the patient." "Who's the picture?" "Oh, thank God. I found it, and I thought I'd lost it." "Thank you." And the man gently stroked the photo. "This is my late son, Oleza. He passed away recently. I was just on my way to order a memorial for him when I felt sick." At that moment, tears came to the eyes of the elderly man. "Let's say it's true, but then look at this picture." And the doctor pulled out his picture and compared both pictures. "Both of them show me only 20 years younger. How can you explain that? Is that possible? I've been thinking all sorts of things over the last few days." The man suddenly looked intently into the surgeon's eyes, turned pale, and suddenly cried, "Is that you, son? You saved my life. That's how it is. After all these years, you've been found. Thank you, and forgive me if you can." "What are you talking about? What son am I to you? My parents are alive. Thank God." "Explain yourself, please." Vyacheslav was indignant. Yes, of course, I'll tell you all about it. But we can't do it in a few words. It would be a long talk. I'm in no hurry. My shift is over." "I'm listening," and the doctor sat down in his chair. It turned out that Alexander Sergeyevich himself was an orphan and grew up in an orphanage. After graduation, he got a job at the construction site as a plasterer. That's where he found his bride, Savita, who was also a wretched orphan. Her grandmother brought her up. They lived very poorly. They started dating and then living together. Soon Savita realized that she was pregnant with twins. The couple got married and rejoiced, of course, but some misfortune happened during delivery. Hemorrhage opened. The woman could not give birth by herself and doctors began to do an urgent operation. But something went wrong. The young woman died right on the operating table. The 2 babies, twins, were left orphans. Alexander took his sons from the hospital, but he had no idea what to do with them or how to live. He had no relatives, and Savita only had an elderly grandmother of 80, and they had no place of their own, a rented room to live in on their pension. The man was going crazy from the constant crying of children, did not have time to do anything, did not sleep, and clearly realized that he could not support 2 people. I began to wonder what to do. I didn't want to send my own blood to the orphanage. I had been through that hell myself. I knew how bad it was there. That's when his acquaintances advised him of an option. A rich family of doctors without children wants to adopt a child. but only so that no one knows about it. Those were the times when surrogacy was unheard of. Alexander grasped this chance as a straw. His family was well provided for. It would be better for the son than fighting in the orphanage for a piece of bread, and money wouldn't hurt. At least to raise a second son, though the small boys were twins. But Oleg was much bigger and stronger, but Slavik was thin, small, cried a lot, ate badly. So Alexander decided to give Slava away. He would not be able to put him on his feet. The deal was a success. Alexander, on pain of death, promised not to find out anything about the child, not to look for him, and in general to forget about his existence. Then the man was given a fake certificate that his dead wife had only one child, as well as a very large sum of money. Alexander heard nothing more about Slavik or his foster parents. He promised to leave, so he packed up his uncomplicated belongings, his son, and moved to a neighboring village. He raised Oleg as best he could, grabbing any part-time job he could. Of course, the money he received was a good help, enough for a room in a communal apartment, albeit small, but his own, and for a child, too. But Alexander could not raise Oleg as a decent man. Apparently his constant absence due to earnings, and even without a mother growing up, in general, since childhood Oleg was a troublemaker. As much as he could, he would break a window at school, or get F grade. After school he did not want to work, and had nothing to learn from. Before the army he and his friends stole a motorcycle. Oleg was looking at a serious sentence, so Alexander decided to take the blame. So as not to ruin his son's fate by going to jail, he went to jail for 3 years instead of him. He thought that he would understand what he had done and start a new life, but no. After the army, Oleg continued to be friends with dubious personalities and never had a family or children. He worked wherever he could, and recently he was hit to death by a car. Such an unenviable fate, and I'm happy for you, son. You're obviously a smart and good man, since you've achieved such a position and saved people. So maybe it's all for the best? Alexander finished his sad tale. Vyacheslav was in shock. A storm of emotions overwhelmed him. He didn't know what to say, how to react, how to live with it at all. I need to think it over. Excuse me, I'll come to you later. Vyacheslav only managed to squeeze himself out. The doctor rushed home with no memory of himself. Lenica, his beloved and faithful wife, only she could help him make the right decision. On the threshold, Vyacheslav excitedly and confusedly told Lena everything, while emotionally waving his hands. Can you imagine? Why didn't anyone tell me anything before? All my life my parents kept quiet, and I couldn't understand why I didn't look like them at all. Lanky, unshapely, and those glasses, and they kept telling me, it's you, my son, who went to my grandmother's family. What cynicism. And the scouse is good. He melted his son and is happy, and did not think of me for all my life. And now I'm supposed to call this strange man daddy, or what? The man was getting angry. Lena went to her locker, took out some cognac, poured it into a shot glass, and handed it to her husband. So, my dear, all you just said was emotion. So now you have a drink, and then I'll draw you a hot bath, and get a good night's sleep. And in the morning, with a clear head, we'll talk. And she hugged her beloved husband tenderly. Vyacheslav listened to his wise wife and did just that. In the morning, the couple continued their conversation. Well, now listen to what I think. Don't accuse anyone of anything, and don't you ever tell your parents anything. It would be a terrible blow to them. Think about it. They have nurtured you all these years, raised you with dignity, educated you. You are their pride and support. What's their fault? Now imagine if you'd stayed with your own father. What would you have become? What could he give you? So thank fate that things turned out this way and nothing else. That's my opinion, and it's up to you. I'll support you either way. And she kissed her husband on the cheek, and Vyacheslav thought about his wife's words. And really, God only knows what Alexander was going through, giving me up forever to someone else's family, knowing he would never see me again. That's courage, too, to keep a promise, and never come close, never to find out how your little blood is. You can see that he's not a bad person. It's just that his fate is so unfortunate. And your parents, I should bow down to them for a happy, unclouded childhood. Unlike my brother Oleg, after thinking it over carefully, he made a decision for himself. and his heart immediately felt better. After buying all sorts of presents and normal clothes on the way to work, Vyacheslav ran to his father's room first thing. He sat down next to me and said, "Dad, I'm sorry for my reaction yesterday. I had to sleep with it to put that news in my head. I want to thank you, even though you didn't raise me. But if it wasn't for you and Mom, I wouldn't even be in the world. I am not offended by you. Let me give you a hug." And the doctor gave the man a big hug. Alexander cried, unable to contain his emotions. He no longer hoped that he would ever meet his Slavic. "Dad, don't you worry about anything. I'm going to help you. When you get out of here, I'll introduce you to my granddaughter and my wife. You know how wonderful she is. You're not alone now. You've got family next to you, except that my parents, who brought me up, are as dear to me as you are. I will never betray them. I will never leave them, you know." "Yes, of course, son. I understand everything. I myself am ready to bow out the waist to these people who were able to bring up such a wonderful son." And the old man wept again. The first thing Vyacheslav and Alexander did after discharge was to go and order a nice memorial for Oleg and his mother, who never got to see her children. The doctor stood near the graves for a long time and thought about how unpredictable life is. After a while, Vyacheslav decided to invite Alexander to his home. Upon entering the apartment, the old man was noticeably nervous and shy, but the wise Lena took everything into her own hands. "Well, Alexander Sergeyevich, come in. Don't be shy. I've got a pie just in time. Ksumsha, come and meet me. Here's your grandpa Sasha, and this is our Ksumshka, the giggler." The little girl looked at the man inquisitively. "Hello, Mom. I already have 2 grandfathers, don't I?" she asked in an incomprehensible way. "See how lucky you are. All your friends have 1 or 2 grandfathers at most, and now you have 3. They'll all be jealous." Lena laughed. "It's really great. Grandpa Sasha, do you want me to play the piano for you? I already know 10 songs." The child babbled on and on. "Sure, granddaughter, I want to," said the old man